The steam rose from the bowl of chicken soup as I set it gently in front of my 7-year-old granddaughter, Hazel. The scent of carrots, celery, and soft dumplings filled my little kitchen, wrapping the room in warmth. Hazel sat across from me, her small hands resting perfectly still in her lap. She lifted the spoon, paused halfway, and froze. Her big brown eyes flickered toward me, uncertain, searching. Then, in the quietest whisper, she asked, "Am I allowed to eat?" The question sliced through me like a blade. I forced a smile onto my face, even as my chest tightened. "Of course, Hazel," I said softly. "You don't need to ask. This food is for you." The moment the words left my lips, tears welled in her eyes. Her shoulders trembled. The spoon clattered onto the table, and a sob broke free from her throat. I reached across, resting my hand on her arm, steady, gentle. "Grandma's here," I whispered. "You are safe. Eat all you want." But Hazel shook her head and buried her face in her sleeve. Her fragile little body shook with quiet cries. Right then, I knew something was terribly wrong, though I didn't yet know the depth of it. That one question would echo in my mind for days to come. Am I allowed to eat? My name is Grace Whitaker. I am 68 years old, a retired bookkeeper who has spent most of her life in Mesa, Arizona. My days are simple now, tending to the garden, cooking small meals, and walking to St. Andrew's Church on Sunday mornings. Life has slowed, but I've always found peace in its rhythms. My son Daniel is 39. He works long hours as a construction supervisor, often gone for days at a time on job sites across the state. He tries his best, but the burden of raising Hazel alone weighs heavily on him. Hazel, my granddaughter, is only 7. She has wide, curious eyes and a love for drawing little sketches of flowers, houses, and sometimes people holding hands. Since her mother passed away, though, that light in her eyes has dimmed. She is quieter now, almost cautious in every movement, as if she fears taking up too much space. We live in a neighborhood lined with bougainvillea brick patios. From the outside, everything looks calm and ordinary, but beneath that surface, pain often hides in silence. Before everything changed, there was Sophia. My first daughter-in-law came into our family like a burst of sunlight. Sophia Rise was the kind of woman who carried warmth in her smile and gentleness in her hands. She loved to cook, and every Sunday she would make pella, filling the kitchen with saffron and garlic. She always set aside the best portion for Daniel and never forgot to pack me a plate too. "You like it spicy, right, Mom?" she'd ask with a laugh. Hazel adored her mother. As a toddler, she would cling to Sophia's skirt, babbling "Mommy" with a joy that made the whole house ring. I thought those moments of laughter and food and family would last forever. But forever ended too soon. When Hazel was barely 2, Sophia found a lump in her breast. At first she tried to brush it off, but soon hospitals, treatments, and prayers filled our days. Daniel sold his beloved truck to cover bills. I lit candles at St. Andrew's every night, begging for a miracle. Cancer showed no mercy. Just weeks before Hazel's 5th birthday, Sophia slipped away in a sterile hospital room. Daniel wept, clutching Hazel as if she were the only thread keeping him alive. Hazel, too young to understand, only whispered, "Where's Mommy?" And none of us had an answer that could heal her. 2 years after Sophia's passing, Daniel called me one evening with a spark in his voice I hadn't heard in so long. He told me he had met someone. Her name was Brooke Allen, a widow from Tucson. He said she was kind, thoughtful, and good with children. He wanted me to meet her. When Brooke first came to the house, she brought a casserole, neatly wrapped in foil, and greeted me with an eager smile. She bent down to Hazel's level, her voice sweet and gentle. "You're such a beautiful girl," she said, touching Hazel's hair. Hazel gave only a small nod, clinging closer to my side. Brooke didn't seem to notice. She carried herself with charm, polished and confident, speaking easily about her life, her love of baking, and her hope to build a happy family again. Daniel's eyes lit up whenever she spoke. After years of grief, I saw hope return to his face, and part of me was relieved. Perhaps Brooke could help rebuild what we had lost. Perhaps Hazel would find another source of motherly care. For a moment, I let myself believe love had found us again. At first, everything looked fine. Brooke kept a tidy home, cooked warm meals, and spoke with the kind of confidence that wins over neighbors quickly. At church, she would smile brightly, holding Hazel's hand, and call her my sweet girl. To anyone watching, she looked like the picture of devotion. But as the months passed, I noticed Hazel changing. She laughed less. She stopped bringing me her messy crayon drawings, the ones she used to be so proud of. Her steps grew quieter, her shoulders tenser. When we sat down to eat, she would sometimes glance around the table before lifting her fork, as if waiting for a signal. Small things lining up her shoes too perfectly by the door, folding her napkin 3 times before placing it down began to stand out. I brushed it aside, telling myself children grieve in strange ways. Maybe Hazel just needed more time. Daniel, tired from long days on the job, only saw Brooke's helpfulness. He told me, "Mom, she takes such good care of Hazel. I don't know what I'd do without her." And I wanted to believe him. I wanted to believe we'd all been given a second chance at family. Sometimes love blinds us not to what we hope for, but to what's really happening right in front of us. One Friday afternoon, Daniel called with urgency in his voice. He and Brooke had to drive to Tucson for a few days to handle family matters, and they asked if I could keep Hazel. My heart lifted at the chance. Of course, I said, trying to hide how much I longed for time with my granddaughter. The next morning, their old sedan pulled into my driveway. Brooke stepped out first, balancing baby Evan in her arms. She handed me a bag of Hazel's neatly folded clothes, speaking in her usual cheerful tone. "Don't forget her milk before bed, and she tends to leave her jacket behind," she reminded me with a practiced smile. Hazel climbed out slowly, clutching her pink backpack decorated with princesses. When I bent to hug her, I felt her little body stiffen, as though bracing against something unseen. Her lips pressed into a thin line that trembled under the effort of a forced smile. As Daniel and Brooke drove away, I glanced down at Hazel's face. For the first time, I saw her shoulders ease, just a little, as if a weight had lifted the moment the car disappeared down the street. That evening I cooked Hazel's favorite chicken soup with tender vegetables and a plate of warm cornbread on the side. The kitchen smelled of comfort, the kind that usually draws a smile from a child. I set the bowl in front of her and gently pushed the cornbread closer. "Eat up, sweetheart," I said, keeping my voice light. "It's still warm." Hazel picked up the spoon, held it above the bowl, and froze. Her little shoulders trembled. She looked at me with eyes full of fear and whispered, "Grandma, am I allowed to eat today?" The words hollowed me out. A 7-year-old child asking permission to eat. My throat tightened, but I forced a steady tone. "Of course you can, Hazel. This food is yours." Her tears came fast. The spoon slipped from her hand, clattering onto the table. She buried her face in her arms and sobbed, her whole body shaking with each breath. I moved beside her, rubbing her back, whispering comfort. I lifted the spoon, fed her bite by bite as she cried, wiping her cheeks gently with a napkin. "See? It's good, isn't it?" I murmured. But even as she ate, I knew this moment wasn't about soup or cornbread. It was about something deeper, something breaking inside her. And the sound of her question kept echoing in my chest. Am I allowed to eat today? The next morning I rose early, determined to make breakfast. Hazel would love toast brushed with olive oil and sprinkled with tomatoes, alongside a glass of warm milk. I set it before her, smiling. "Eat, honey. Grandma made this just for you." Hazel picked up a slice, then stopped. Her lips parted, and in a trembling voice she asked, "Can I eat this?" My heart clenched. "Yes, sweetheart. You don't ever have to ask here." Only then did she take a small bite, chewing slowly as if every movement needed permission. Later, on our walk to school, I bought her a fresh donut and a red balloon, hoping to bring some light to her face. She held the bag close, but instead of digging in, she whispered, "Can I keep it?" At home, I laid out crayons and paper, remembering how she once loved to draw. She hesitated, clutching a crayon like it might betray her. "Can I draw?" she asked. I nodded, smiling through the ache in my chest. Hazel drew carefully a man, a woman, and a baby. When I asked gently, "Where are you in the picture?" her eyes filled with tears. She pressed her lips tight and looked away. That silence told me more than any words could. Hazel was carrying a secret too heavy for her small shoulders. I knew I couldn't stay in the dark any longer. If Hazel couldn't tell me everything, I had to see what others had noticed. The next day, I walked down the street to visit our neighbor, Mrs. Porter, a widow who often sat on her porch with her embroidery. She greeted me warmly, but her eyes narrowed when I asked about Hazel. Mrs. Porter lowered her voice. "Grace, I've seen Brooke punish that little girl in the yard." Once Hazel dropped a plate, and Brooke made her kneel on the concrete in the midday sun. She cried and begged, but Brooke wouldn't let her up. I wanted to step in, but the gate was locked. When I knocked, Brooke shouted for me to mind my own business. Her words shook me, but I needed more. I went to St. Andrew's Church to speak with Pastor Graham. When I mentioned Hazel, he sighed. She used to smile when she came here. Lately she barely speaks. Brooke often answers for her, saying Hazel is just shy. But I've noticed she pours all her affection on little Evan while Hazel stands alone. With each testimony, the unease in my chest hardened into certainty. It wasn't grief making Hazel afraid. It was something far more deliberate, and I could no longer pretend otherwise. When Daniel and Brooke returned from their trip, I prepared a simple stew and salad to welcome them back. I wanted the table to feel warm, but inside my heart pounded with unease. Hazel sat beside me, silent, her hands folded tightly in her lap. Daniel smiled, exhausted but grateful. "Thanks for watching her, Mom," he said as he reached for bread. Brooke poured wine into his glass, her smile wide and confident. I took a breath, my voice calm but firm. "Daniel, do you know that your daughter has to ask for permission before she eats?" The air in the room shifted. Daniel froze mid-bite, his fork suspended. He looked at me in confusion, then at Brooke. Brooke's face didn't flinch. She placed her glass down slowly and answered with a faint smile. "That's right. Eating is a privilege. Children need discipline. If you let them do whatever they want, they'll grow up spoiled." My hand slammed against the table before I could stop myself. "That is not discipline, Brooke. That is cruelty. Hazel is only 7. No child should fear being denied food." Daniel frowned, his voice uneasy. "Mom, maybe you're misunderstanding. Brooke has been patient. Hazel is calmer now. Now." I pointed at Hazel, who sat motionless, her eyes fixed on her untouched plate. "Look at her, Daniel. Do you call this calm? She's terrified." Hazel's small hands clenched tighter under the table. The silence was crushing. Brooke lifted baby Evan onto her lap, stroking him as he babbled happily, the contrast unbearable. "Raising children is our matter, not yours," Brooke said coldly. "We'll be leaving now. I'll pick Hazel up tomorrow." I held Hazel's trembling hand, my resolve hardening. This was no longer about family disagreements. It was about protecting my granddaughter. That night I lay awake, Hazel curled up beside me, her little body trembling even in sleep. I knew tomorrow Brooke would return, demanding to take her back. I couldn't let that happen. Fear had stolen too much of Hazel's childhood already. In the morning I called my old friend Aaron Blake, a family lawyer I trusted. My voice shook as I explained everything I had seen and heard Hazel's questions, Mrs. Porter's testimony, Pastor Graham's concern. Aaron listened carefully, then said, "Grace, you need to contact Child Protective Services immediately. Keep your words factual. Give details, not emotions. They'll act if they see a pattern." With trembling hands, I dialed Speece. I spoke slowly, carefully, recording Hazel's words as best I could remember. "My granddaughter says she is denied food. She is punished by kneeling in the sun. She has been locked in a dark room. I have witnesses who can confirm patterns of neglect." When I hung up, I felt both fear and relief. Fear of what would come next, but relief that silence would no longer be my prison. For Hazel's sake, I had taken the first step toward uncovering the truth. And I promised myself I would not back down, no matter what storm followed. The next afternoon, a white sedan pulled into my driveway. Out stepped a social worker named Amanda Lee, her notebook in hand, followed by a uniformed officer. Amanda's voice was calm and steady as she knelt down to Hazel's level. "Hi, sweetheart. I'm here to help. Can you tell me what happens at home?" Hazel clung to my hand, her lips trembling. I gave her a small nod of encouragement. After a pause, she whispered, "If I'm not good, Mommy Brooke doesn't let me eat. One day she cooked dinner, but I wasn't allowed to have any, and if I break something, she puts me in the dark room." Amanda's eyes softened, but her pen moved swiftly across the page. The officer exchanged a glance with her and nodded. Turning to me, Amanda said gently, "Miss Whitaker, Hazel will stay with you temporarily while we investigate further. It's important that she feels safe right now." Relief flooded me. I hugged Hazel close as Brooke and Daniel stood by the doorway, stunned. Brooke's face hardened. "You'll regret this," she hissed. But I held Hazel tighter, steady in my heart. The only thing I regretted was not protecting her sooner. Weeks later, the case moved to court. I walked through the heavy doors, holding Hazel's hand, her small fingers gripping mine like an anchor. She did not have to testify directly. Her statement had already been recorded by Amanda, but her presence alone was powerful. The judge listened as Hazel's words played back. "If I'm not good, Mommy Brooke won't let me eat. Sometimes she locks me in the dark room." The courtroom fell silent. Even Daniel lowered his head, unable to meet his daughter's eyes. Mrs. Porter testified next. She described seeing Hazel forced to kneel in the hot sun after dropping a plate, tears streaming down her cheeks. Pastor Graham confirmed Hazel's unusual silence at church, how Brooke often spoke for her while doting on baby Evan. Brooke tried to defend herself, her voice cracking. "I was just trying to teach discipline. Children need structure. I never meant harm." But the evidence told a different story. The judge's voice was steady as he ruled. What Brooke called discipline was in fact abuse. The court granted Daniel full custody of Hazel. Brooke was sentenced to prison, and custody of Evan was arranged separately, with visitation rights reviewed by the court. When the gavel struck, I exhaled a breath I had been holding for months. Justice, at last, had spoken, not loudly, but clearly enough for a little girl who had once been afraid to ask if she was allowed to eat. Life after court did not suddenly turn perfect, but slowly, a new rhythm emerged. Hazel began to smile again, though at first it was shy and fleeting. One evening I served her a plate of fried rice with vegetables, and for the first time, she didn't pause to ask permission. She picked up her spoon and ate freely, even asking for seconds. I nearly cried with joy. Daniel, though weighed down by guilt, devoted himself to his daughter. He apologized often, his voice heavy. "I should have seen it, Hazel. I should have protected you." Hazel would lean into him, her small arms around his neck, and whisper, "Just don't let it happen again, Daddy." When Evan came to visit, Hazel played with him in the yard. They drew with chalk, shared the swing, and laughed. Still, I noticed moments when Hazel's eyes clouded, a quiet fear that love might again be unequal. I reminded her gently, "You are loved just as much as your brother." Healing came not as one big moment, but as small steps, each laugh, each meal, each bedtime hug, a rhythm slowly stitching her heart back together. Looking back, I understand now that love and control can never be the same thing. Discipline is meant to guide, not to frighten or deprive. A child should never have to ask for permission to eat, to laugh, or to simply exist. If you ever notice a small voice hesitating, pay attention, because those whispers may be silent cries for help. Thank you for staying with Hazel's story until the end. If it touched you, please like this video, share it with someone who might need it, and leave a comment about what signs you would look for now.